All right, Genesis chapter 42, as you can probably see from your handout here. Last week we studied how Joseph came to be the second in command of Egypt. And tonight we're going to read about him being reunited with his, well, I guess part of his family for the first time. And I guess it's been about 20 years or a little bit over since then. So question number one, as always, kind of a think about it, discussion question, wake up question, whatever you want to call it. How many people here have like an annual family reunion? Okay, several. My family, on my younger side, they never did really do much of things like that, but it seems like around this area it's pretty common. And you know, you just kind of think about why do we do that? What's the purpose of a family reunion? Food? We got one honest individual.
They get acquainted with the rest of the family they haven't seen for some time.
Yeah, it kind of helps you keep up with each other, doesn't it?
Right.
You know, a lot of times, of course, children grow up and move on, and a lot of times they move to different places, sometimes far away. And your relatives, I remember as kids, you know, I hung out with my cousins all the time, but I rarely see one of my cousins nowadays. But you know, you don't see each other for a long time, and you just kind of lose touch, don't you? And that's pretty easy to do in the society that we live in, and of course, social media. I guess you could say it helps or hurts or however you want to look at it, but. There is some communication that does take place because of it. That's good. But it kind of keeps us, you know, familiar with each other and what's going on in each other's lives. And could you imagine, and just think of it from this perspective, if you went, and I'm talking about your immediate family, if the last time you saw your brother or your sister was when you guys were 17, and then you don't see each other again until you're almost 40 years old. I mean, do you think you could even recognize one another? I didn't have a picture of me when I was 17 compared with one when I was 40, but I'll tell you what, I look a lot different. And a lot of things change over that, specifically that period of time. And you know, you read about Joseph being reunited here, but his brothers don't even recognize him, do they? And I think there's some other reasons why, but I think that certainly is part of the reason that that's going to come into play there. So let's talk a little bit about, do you have a comment?
I would just guess one of the reasons they didn't recognize him, I'm sure he was dressed like an Egyptian.
Yeah.
And, you know, with all their unique dress, and they didn't suspect that he would be in a position that he was in.
No, that would certainly come into play. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here, but I think there are several reasons. But I also think this, he'd gone from a boy to a grown man. And there's a lot of change that had obviously taken place in his life. Let's go to chapter 42, if you're not already over there. Talk a little bit about how it comes to be that Joseph's brothers wind up in Egypt in front of him. So question number 2 on your handout is who went down into Egypt?
His two brothers.
How many?
Well, he had 3, but he went with 2, and the other one stayed at home with his dad.
Okay. Anybody disagree with that? Agree?
Verse 3 says 10.
Okay, yeah. He had 10 brothers, didn't he? Well, he actually had 11 brothers, right? But only 10 of them went down into Egypt. And the next question is, who didn't go? Benjamin, right? Benjamin stayed at home, right? And so one of the things that comes up immediately in this text is the reason why Benjamin stayed at home.
Some calamity would befall him.
Yeah. So the painful memory of Joseph, you know, the past and what had happened to him, Had Jacob moved on and forgotten all about it? No, we're talking about, almost 20 years later here. And he's still dwelling upon this event and the fact that he's lost Joseph, the son who he loved the most.
Jacob, he was a smart guy. He knew about the dreams. He knew his brothers hated him. You think he really deep down thought that they done something to him?
Well, that's actually, I had two questions on here. So the first one is this. Yeah, you brought it up, but the first one is this. Do you think that Jacob knew how his sons felt toward Joseph?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know how you could miss it, right? If your children hated one another and they couldn't even talk to each other without getting in an argument, do you think he'd notice it? I think that'd be pretty obvious, right? So the second question is the one that Steve asked you, and I think it's a good one. Do you think that Jacob ever suspected that they might have done something to Joseph?
They brought your coat back to him, so he knew it was his play.
Yeah. And, we talked about it a while back when we studied the brothers of Joseph here. Did he know his sons were not too good guys? Yeah, because he had Joseph checking up on him, remember? But he knew that they weren't the best of characters when it came to this world. And so I don't know. Did he in his mind, maybe the back of his mind, say, hey, there's a possibility these guys could have done something to Joseph. If I send Benjamin out here along with them, now why was Benjamin important?
Youngest son.
His youngest son by whom?
The woman, the wife he loved.
You remember her name? Rachel. There you go. Rachel is his favorite wife, right? Had two sons by her. Joseph was the first one, and then Benjamin was the second. So he only had one son left through Rachel. And I imagine whenever Joseph disappeared, that he probably kind of put the favoritism on Benjamin instead of Joseph. But, if that's the case, and he has any inkling or suspicion, that they might have done something to him, would you send him out there on this long trip with him? I mean, that'd be the perfect opportunity, wouldn't it? And so he ends up not going. So question number 3 is this. Why do Joseph's brothers end up in Egypt? What was the purpose of their journey?
They went there to get food.
Yeah, they went there to get food, and why there? And why get food?
That was the only place around that had any, and it stored it during the first 7 years.
Yeah. So what we read about in the first part here of chapter 42 is that there's a great famine that is taking place. Now, again, we read about it. God foretold about it. It wasn't just in the nation of Egypt, though, was it? Because now we're talking about the land of Canaan. So what we would, consider the Middle East today, it affected that far up, down toward Egypt. All those nations were, in that area, was affected by this famine. But Jacob hears that there's food in Egypt and that they're selling it. They're opening the storehouses up and they're selling it even to foreigners. And so he tells his sons, you guys need to go down there and you need to go get us some food. Now, a lot of times I think we read about these famines and, that's one thing that I just can't imagine and appreciate it, I guess. Because it was severe enough that, what does he talk about here?
Lest we die, he said.
Yeah, he said, listen, if we don't go get some food somewhere, we're all going to die. And you think about, this is life and death situation. This isn't, a bad time that they've fallen upon. This could literally wipe all of them out. And when you stop and think about Jacob, I think sometimes we say, well, he had to get food for him and his sons. Listen, Jacob was probably one of the largest farmers, ranchers, we might say, in the land of Canaan. Okay, how many animals did he have? That's right, a bunch. A bunch. Who did he inherit a lot of them from?
His father.
Yeah, well, his father Isaac, and then Isaac got all his stuff from who? Abraham. Remember, Abraham had a lot of cattle. Whenever he passed it on, son that got the inheritance was Isaac. And so Jacob got the right of the firstborn, right? So he was the one who inherited the better part of the wealth of his father after he dies. Now, it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about the story. Not only did he inherit that, but he also worked for Laban for, wasn't it 20 years? About 20 years, I think he worked for Laban. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's pretty close.
That's right.
And you kind of get a picture, if you go back in Genesis chapter 32, as he's leaving Laban, and he's taking all these animals that he's got while he's there, remember he runs into his brother Esau. And one of the things that he does to try to appease Esau's anger is he sends him gifts. He sends him gifts before he actually meets up with him. And so if you go over to Genesis 32, and we'll just read a quick excerpt here about verse 13. Just notice the size of the gift that he sends to Esau. And this isn't all of his animals. This is just what he's gotten from Laban, his part, what he got from Laban. But in verse 13 of Genesis 32, it says, so he lodged there that same night and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother. 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. So that's, you add all those numbers up. I kind of did it in my head quickly, so don't. If somebody's got a better system or can add it up quicker, I think it was like 570 or somewhere there, close to 600 animals that he gave to his brother as a gift. So what does that tell you? Again, that was what he got from working with Laban, out of what he got from working with Laban. That's not counting what he inherited from his father Isaac. So how many animals do you think he had to take care of? What did you say, JT?
It's over 2,000, but I can't.
he said a bunch. And that's right. Yeah, thousands, I would say. Thousands upon thousands. And one of the things that they would have had to do is they would have had to find, at least in some part, some other source of food for these cattle. There's that great famine in the land. So you think about that. Think about how many people he had working for him. Just to take care of all that. Then he had his family. He had his sons. I mean, we're talking about a lot of food that it would take to run the operation that he was running. And so he was in danger, of losing a lot of stuff. He was basically on the brink of disaster. So he hears that there's food in Egypt, and he tells his sons, hey, there's food in Egypt. They're selling it to us. And what did his sons do?
Well, they went down there.
Yeah, they end up going down there, but what's their initial reaction?
I need to read all of you. This is too long back.
What's he ask them in verse 1?
Why are you looking at this?
Why are you standing here looking at each other? Right?
But that was for them to go there and buy grain, that's foreigners, and they could easily just said, well, we're just gonna take all your stuff and make you a slave or kill them, or take them and kill them.
I mean, that one reason that I don't think they'd be too excited to go down to Egypt, just what you said right there. I mean,
300-mile trip too, right?
yeah, I mean, you're talking 250 to 300 miles. And that's like 6 weeks. That's not an overnight journey and you're back home. But 6 weeks, you got to go down there. You got to take a lot of money with you, don't you? If you go buy food, wasn't safe safe way to travel. That's why 10 of them went together, and probably a lot more. I imagine there were a lot of servants that went with them too, that aren't specifically mentioned.
You
But
have to have a lot of animals to pack it back.
yeah, and you'll read about the donkeys that they brought back, obviously to carry the grain that they had purchased from Egypt. But that they wouldn't be so excited to go down there because, first of all, you're talking about 3 months away from home. Second thing is, when you get down there, there's no guarantee that you're going to come back. They could very easily just make them a slave and nobody would ever think twice about it. And then I think there's a third reason too. Anybody imagine what that would be? Who was in Egypt?
His brother.
His brother. They sold him to the Ishmaelites who were headed to Egypt to trade. And so I think they probably thought in their minds he wound up in Egypt somewhere. Now I don't know that they were too worried about running into him, and if he was being a slave, but there was a slim possibility that they could actually encounter him or run into him there. So why would they just stand around and not just jump up and, take off as soon as they find out there's food there? I think there's a lot of reasons that contributed to that. So we read about them coming into the land of Egypt. They wind up before Joseph, and whenever they come before Joseph, they bow down before him. Question number 4 here, what dream of Joseph ends up coming to pass in this chapter here, chapter 42 of Genesis? Yeah, remember this dream again. This was when he was a young boy. This has been almost 20 years since he had this dream. But remember that they were gathering sheaves in the field, and his brother's sheaf of grain bowed down before his. And he remembered that dream. In fact, you go down and read a little bit later, I think, is it verse 9 that mentions that specifically? Anybody see it right offhand? Okay, verse 9 mentions that he remembered that dream. So think about Joseph here for a moment. He recognizes these are his brothers. They don't recognize him, but he recognizes them. They come in front of him. They bow down before him. He remembers this dream. What do you think that did for Joseph?
It had an impact on him because he returned their money back in the food sacks.
Yeah, he does end up doing some things for him that was more than favorable, right?
Don't you think he had an idea that God had a hand in this?
Well, that's what he winds up telling them in the end, isn't it? You guys thought this was all about doing something bad to me, but God meant it for good.
Don't you think it'd be a little bit of temptation?
Well, it would, yeah. It would to rub it in their face, wouldn't it? But I think.
You don't think he missed it a little bit? Been in prison for 3 days. I said some people say it's just trying hard to see if their heart was still bad.
I think there was a purpose why he did what he did. But
He was working on to get that down there, but ultimately that's.
yeah. Yeah, and another thing too, I think we'll talk a little bit about this tonight. When you're away from somebody for 20 years, are they usually the person that you knew them last time, same person? Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. And I think one of the things that Joseph does through all this is he's trying to figure out, what are these guys like now? Because the last time that he had interacted with them, they were not good people, were they? So, I don't know. Maybe he messed with them a little bit, Steve. What do you think?
Well, I think he was messing with me. He said, hey, I'm your brother, and here I am.
Yeah.
Marched up there with an army of caravan people and got them the first time.
Could have. Yeah. there's a lot of things he could have done to him, right? And I think one of the things that, or one of the reasons that he didn't too is, Benjamin's missing. And in his mind, he's probably saying, I wonder what happened to him. I know what happened to me. He's my brother. I wonder if they got to him too. And so I think one of the things he's trying to figure out in all this is Benjamin alive? If he is, where's he at? What's going on? How do they feel toward him?
Well, he gets up the wrong Lord of the realm.
Yeah, he did. But he didn't find out without just asking.
He was a better man than maybe a lot of other people.
Yeah.
You know what happened. If it had been the other way around, his brother certainly would have killed him.
Yeah, I know that for a fact, don't you? So anyway, this dream comes to pass, and I think that probably had to be a point in Joseph's life where he thinks back, he thinks about this dream, he sees it happening, and he's thinking, all this was God's plan for me from the beginning. That had to be kind of a humbling recognition, but again, that's what he acknowledges in the end. This was really just God's plan getting me down here so you guys didn't starve to death. And he's able to, that had to be, I think, encouraging him to see the hand of God in all this. God knew all this was going to happen, and he'd already had all these plans from the beginning. But anyway, it gave him, I think, a deeper sense or understanding that God had been working all this time, to try to accomplish something good through him.
Well, as a ruler of Egypt, there could be a little bit to his question there, thinking that way too. I mean, let's face it, he's in charge now.
Yeah.
And you go wrong about this, and he's out of a job there.
Yeah. And again,
I
this.
realize he's got a man. I don't know about the rest of these. How many people believe in God? So.
Yeah. So we already mentioned question number 5 here. Joseph recognized them. They didn't recognize him. What are some of the reasons they wouldn't recognize him? Here's something interesting too. They wind up in front of Joseph. Now, was Joseph the only guy in charge of grain?
Yes.
The chief one. The chief one.
He was the head, wasn't he? But remember, the plan that he instituted was he had all these commissioners located throughout, Egypt and all these different storehouses. And I imagine what happened is if any Egyptian came and wanted food, I imagine they gave them food. They sold to them. But when you start having foreigners come in your country, I think there was a lot of screening that had to take place, don't you? Why?
You're thinking that he was looking for his family.
Well, I think he was probably in charge of screening the foreigners, I would imagine. If somebody came from a foreign nation and wanted to buy from Egypt, you think they just sold to everybody and anybody who came?
Well, like that, you're spies.
Yeah. I think there was a real danger. First of all, I don't know if you could afford to do that. I don't know if you could afford, if they had enough grain that they could sell to the entire land, every foreigner that came in. Secondly, you had to make sure that they were there for that purpose. Because there was a chance that this was an opportunity for some of your enemies to stick some spies in there in Egypt. Nobody would think anything about it, and kind of spy out their defenses and, bring back a plan to try to conquer. And so I imagine Joseph was personally in charge of screening all the foreign people that came through to buy grain here. But again, a couple of reasons, didn't want to just deplete the supply the first year, and you had to watch out. But a couple of reasons why that they wouldn't recognize him. What did we say?
Possibly his dress.
Yeah, his clothes. I mean, he was in Egyptian dress, royal Egyptian dress. That would have been much different.
And plus one verse says that he spoke to them in Egyptian
Yeah,
and had to have an interpreter.
yeah.
Even though he knew their language and he recognized them, he intentionally didn't use them.
Yeah, there was no indication that he spoke anything other than the Egyptian language. So they didn't have any reason to think this guy standing in front of them could speak Hebrew, Anything else that you can think of? Well, we talked a little bit about age, right? Hadn't seen each other in over 20 years,
The
so.
last thing I think is that the fact that he was in the position he was in.
Yeah. I mean, if they were looking for Joseph, where would they look for him?
Slave.
On the throne of Egypt? No, that'd be the last place, right? Okay.
They thought he was dead.
Yeah. Well, they figured he's probably at the lowest part, if not, right? Here's something pretty interesting if you ever studied any of the Egyptian culture too. Have you ever seen any of the paintings or the statues, especially of royalty of Egypt? There's something unique about them. Do you know what it is? Think about their appearance.
Wig or makeup.
They had a very smooth appearance, right? Facial hair? No. A lot of times they even had their heads shaved, right? And that was in part because of Egyptian culture. You know, they thought if you had hair on your body, that made you unclean. And so if you were royalty, you especially had to maintain a clean appearance. And part of what we read about is when Joseph, before he comes in front of Pharaoh, what does he have to do? He's got to shave too. It's mentioned specifically, right? Get on clean clothes and shave. Now, I think of shaving, well, he just had a few whiskers, but I'd say it was his whole body before he could even appear before Pharaoh, because if you didn't, you were considered unclean by Egyptian ritual. So, I mean, you take a guy and you shave all his hair off, is he going to look a little different? Yeah, well, some of us do. Some of us don't look too much, but he's going to have a little bit different appearance than what you remember him as. So that would have been another one of those contributing factors there. But there were a lot of reasons, I think, why they wouldn't have recognized him. So question number 6 here, what does Joseph do to his brothers? What's the first thing he does?
Well, first they gave their money back when they bought food.
Okay,
That was the first thing.
that's a little bit later on though, right?
Later on,
Interrogates him for a little while.
Yeah, he wants to figure out, who are you guys? Where'd you come from?
right.
And so they kind of give him the backstory. He said, well, I think you guys are probably spies. No, we're not spies. We're all the same family. We're brothers. We all had the same father. We have a brother back home. Our youngest is back home now.
When they said he talked roughly.
Yeah.
What do you think that means?
I think it's just the fact that he accused them of being spies, don't you? I doubt he did it in a polite way. I imagine they thought he was pretty serious when he was talking to them about it. But he ends up putting them in prison, doesn't he? For how long? 3 days. He says, you guys are spies. Put you in prison for 3 days. Well, what do you think his brothers were thinking?
We're done.
That's it. That's the end of the story. It's over with, right?
Here we go.
Yeah. Just like we thought. Shouldn't have made that journey. But he ends up with a proposition for him, right? What was his proposition after 3 days? Yeah. He said, here's what I'll do. I believe you guys are spies. You say you're not, and here's how you can prove it to me. You say your youngest brother's back at home here. He said, I'm gonna keep one of you as prisoner, and if you bring your younger brother back to me, I know you're telling the truth. And I know you guys aren't spies, and then you'll be free to trade and traffic here in the land of Egypt. Well, again, why would Joseph do that?
So he wanted to see everyone in the family.
Part of the reason, yeah. I think deep down, he wants to figure out if Benjamin's all right or not, don't you?
Right.
And they could tell him, we have a younger back here, brother at home alive, but they also told their dad that he died by the hands of a wild beast, right?
Right.
So he knew you couldn't really trust what they said. And so I think he wants to figure out, is Benjamin really okay? And how they treat him? What's their relationship like with it? kind of interesting, he chooses Simeon. Anybody have any reason why he choose Simeon?
Simeon was the kind of ringleader put in Head Start with, right?
Well, that's, you'll not find it in the scripture, but that's what the Jewish rabbis always taught, that Simeon was the ringleader. And what kind of guy was Simeon?
Simeon and Levi were bad men.
Yeah. In fact, when you go to the end of the book of Genesis, as Jacob is talking about the blessing upon his sons, he says, "You got the murderer's hand." You know?
Everybody in the town didn't.
Yeah. And a guy who was provoked to anger very easily, as he's described there toward in the book of Genesis. So it is quite possible that Simeon was kind of the ringleader in everything that happened to Joseph. But he does hold him. Bible doesn't really tell us exactly why. And when he does that, the brothers, you know, they don't think anybody can understand what they're saying. So what do they start talking about? They start talking about what happened to Joseph, right? And specifically, they started talking about, he finds out some things here that he didn't know. First of all, he finds out that Reuben tried to rescue him. And he overhears this in this conversation. He didn't know that as a 17-year-old kid. You know, he probably thought, well, they all hate me. Then he figures out this guy was trying to rescue me. He was looking out for me. And of course, you know, figure out the story that he's supposed to be dead, right? At least to his father. Let's see here. His reaction, of course, he's overcome with grief. I think one of the things that again, part of what contributes to his grief is finding out that they really did feel badly about what had happened to him, didn't they? Do you glean that from this conversation? You know, they talked about, listen, we're guilty. You know, they regretted doing it. They felt bad about doing it. Did they have a heart? We heard him crying. You know, we heard him pleading and begging for mercy. And we should have shown him mercy. No, we shouldn't have done what we did to him. And Reuben said, isn't that what I told you guys in the first place? You know, I was going to come back and rescue him. And so I think I think Joseph figures out that, hey, they did have a little bit, you know, they did care about me some. It wasn't like they were still happy about what had happened to him. So I think that kind of gives Joseph a little bit of hope. Let's see here. So they leave Egypt. Question 13 here. Joseph, whenever he sends them back with food, he also sends them back with supplies as they go back on their journey. And he also took their money in the money purse that they brought to pay for the grain and put it in their sacks, hid it in their sacks. And evidently one of those days in that 6-week journey, one of them, you know, it says he reaches into his sack to give his donkey some grain to eat, and he discovers his money purse. And immediately he pulls it out, and everybody's now saying, what in the world? And I kind of thought about this. What do you think they thought about that guy at first?
Probably scared him.
Yeah. But do you think that they thought that dude stole that grain? You know, he was supposed to pay for it. He didn't pay for it.
Yeah.
He kept back the money. And what did they discover finally whenever they all get home and pour their sacks out? They all had their money purse. And now, what do you think Jacob thinks? They come back, Simeon's gone. They have all the money that they went with to pay for it in Egypt. I mean, what kind of guys are these?
They sold their other.
Did they get rid of Simeon now? You know, did they sell him into slavery? Did they steal all this grain? And is Joseph or the Egyptians, are they going to be hunting for him? And he got some questions and concerns. The Bible says they were all afraid. They were all afraid about what might happen at that point.
Right. Why do you think Joseph did that?
Well, I think it was just Joseph's nature. I think he wanted, first of all, we know he wanted to do everything he could for his family. We learned that later on. You know, he wanted to come down there and live with him. He was going to take care of him and provide for him. I think he wanted to help them in a difficult time, but I also think he was probably trying to test them and, again, see what kind of people they'd become. You know, what was their character like? Because he knew they were going to have to come back. You know, there was no doubt about that.
We think in verse 22 where it says also his blood is required. It feels like in starting verse 18 they're kind of having a pity party about why they're in prison. Because Reuben is saying, I pleaded with you guys not to sin against the child.
Yeah,
And you wouldn't listen to him.
yeah.
It says therefore behold the blood is required. What's meant by that?
Again, I think it's the idea that according to the law of Moses, if you did something to an innocent person, then that was upon your head. Their blood was upon your head, whatever happened to them. And I think probably they believed that, like Steve pointed out, that Joseph probably was dead at this point, and that God was punishing them for what they'd done. You know, God's law was you shed innocent blood, you will get punished, right? And so now I think what they see happening is kind of what we might call divine retribution. You know, God is getting back at us for betraying, or again, if you want to even say or think that they thought he was dead. But Joseph was an innocent guy. I mean, he didn't deserve what they gave to him. And they kind of, I think, saw it as divine payback, what was happening to him. Call it karma. People call it karma today, right?
Yeah, I remember saying how they thought they were dead.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anybody else?